Module 5, we are going to talk about the budget. We are going to talk about the funding. The sole reason you are replying to a request for a proposal is to get funding. So, I'm going to tell you how to do that. Your budget is a detailed listing of expenses to implement your program. How much money is it going to take to make sure your program and your project are successful? When you are dealing with your budget, you have to have exact pricing. You can't guess or guesstimate. It has to be exact pricing. Your budget should have a listing of funds that you will receive, if any, and a detailed listing you will spend to support the program. When you are detailing your budget, you must plan it as you go. As you are planning your outcomes, your methods, your evaluations, facilities, and all of those great things, write out the cost it will take to implement each one of those items. Most RFPs, requests for proposals, will require cash resources and in-kind resources. Resources are things identified to support your project. Cash resources are exactly what the name indicates. What cash do you already have that will support your program? This can be other grants, business ventures, thrift stores, gift stores, garage sales, private donations, cash from your generating operating funds. Cash is what they're looking for. Funders do not like to see that the only cash you have on hand comes from them. This does not speak to the longevity of the program. It also does not show that other people and other organizations trust you and your nonprofit with money. The next resource, in-kind resources. These resources are donated goods and services or time that have a cash value and that will support your program. In-kind donations are always free donations to your program or to your project. Some examples of in-kind donation are vehicles given to you. I once had a brand new year, make, and model Ford F-150 given to me for the entire weekend. Of course, it wasn't for my personal use. It was for my project, but someone handed over the keys to a brand new vehicle just for me. Or in-kind donations could be office space. Maybe someone is letting you use your office space free of charge. Office equipment that can be given to you. Computers, phones, fax machines, maybe. Also, volunteer time is considered an in-kind donation. Most people don't know that. What about printing services? Maybe someone is printing out your newsletter for you for absolutely free. That is considered an in-kind donation. What about mailing services? Maybe someone is mailing off your newsletters for you for absolutely free. That is considered an in-kind donation. Anything that is given to you that you do not have to pay for your program, for your project, is considered an in-kind donation. This part is very important. The value of each item donated must come from the person or organization that is donating the goods and services to your organization. A lot of nonprofits and a lot of organizations mess up on this part because they want to give the value of the vehicle. They want to give the value of the printing services. That's a no-no. Only the person or organization that is giving you the items can give you the value. For example, if a car dealership lets you use a brand new truck for the weekend, as they did for me, then the salesman or the manager must be the one to give the value of the truck. Another example, I had a business owner gift me an entire banquet room and food. I could not give the value of that. That owner had to give me the value of those services, the food, and the banquet room. You cannot guess the value. It must be accepted by your funder. And again, it must be given to you. The value must be given to you by the person or organization that's gifting you the items. Donated volunteer time can be Googled. And a lot of people don't know that volunteer time has a dollar amount associated with it. So if you have volunteers volunteering in your organization or for your project, that volunteer time can be counted as in-kind donation. In order to find out how much volunteer time is worth, all you have to do is Google it. Every year, the cost of volunteer time is updated. All you have to do is look it up. So type in volunteer time for the year. So for 2022 or 2023 or 2024, you can add that value to your in-kind resources. A lot of people don't know that, and a lot of people miss out on those in-kind donations. Now, let's talk about expenses. Expenses, as it pertains to your budget, are things you will have to pay for to support your program. There are two different types of expenses. First, we have direct expenses. These are expenses that directly support your program. For example, salaries or wages. Fringe is also considered direct expenses. Fringe expenses, for those who don't know, are considered your light bill, your water bill, your gas bill, internet services, phone services, your rent, or your mortgage. Of course, there are more direct expenses, but these are just a few. Second, we have indirect expenses. These expenses are indirectly related to the support of your program. For example, if you wanted to hire a consultant, Crystal Petrie Consulting can be covered by your grant. So if you know you want to hire Crystal Petrie Consulting next year or for the next 3 years, you can put that into your grant and it will be covered by your grantor. Also, travel can be covered by your grant. Staff development can be covered by your grant. Even training, such as this training, Get Funding, Create Change, Grant Writing Professional Learning course, can be covered by your grant. You just have to write it in. What about postage and printing? Those are indirect expenses and will be covered. Copying, just to name a few, are all considered indirect expenses. Indirect expenses are also called overhead costs. One thing to note about indirect expenses, some funders will pay indirect expenses and some funders will not pay. Please read the RFP carefully to see what the funders will pay for and what they will not pay for. Some funders will pay salary, some will not. Some funders will pay for your building, some will not. But you must read to know what they will pay for and what they will not pay for. Now, with indirect expenses in your budget, even if your grantor will not pay for indirect expenses, or if they will not pay for salaries, or your building, or your light bill, you still need to put that in your budget because those things count as expenses to running your program and your project. And your budget needs to give a full view of all expenses coming in and going out. When you are figuring out your budget, you will have to give the funder justification for the items listed in your budget. For example, justification for a coordinator will be to develop the evaluation, manage volunteer recruitment, training, supervise staff. So you have to let your funder know why you need each item in your budget. Or what about mileage? If you put mileage into your budget, your justification for mileage could be, for example, your volunteer coordinator is traveling to visit all of the volunteer sites, or your volunteer coordinator is delivering Meals on Wheels to senior citizens or homebound disabled. Whatever your budget item is, you must give a reasonable justification as to why these items support your program and your project. It also helps, and a lot of funders require it, that you give numerical information to add to your justification. For example, your mileage. Right now, or maybe last year, I know mileage was 58 cents per mile. You will need to put mileage, 58 cents per mile, and give how many miles. So, for example, your volunteer coordinator will travel 7,000 miles over the course of 6 months. And again, I'm just making up numbers here, just to give you an example. You will need to put mileage, 58 cents per mile, 7,000 miles. You have to give a justification for why you are listing every item in your budget. For mileage, to find out what that is, all you have to do is Google it, sort of like we do everything nowadays. Now, here are some things that I want to warn you against doing when it comes to creating your budget. First, don't estimate. I said this earlier. Do not estimate your costs. Make sure your costs are firm. Don't use cents in your budget, like $500.50. Don't use cents. Round all money up to the nearest dollar. Mathematical errors make your organization seem less credible. Now, with your mathematical errors, I've said this before. Before you submit your budget, get you someone to read over your budget. someone that's good with numbers and good with math. It could be your finance director, it could be your accountant, it could be your secretary, as long as they are good with numbers. If you submit a budget and the total sum does not equal up, I have seen some grantors deny the funding simply because of a mathematical error. Everything else was perfect, but the budget and the math was wrong, so they said no. Some grantors I have seen will return it to you and say, you have an error in your math. Please fix it and resubmit it, which is a great thing, but you never know which way the funder will go. So please don't put them in that situation. Make sure your math is correct. Make sure you have no errors in your math, in your budget. Now, as part of your budget, the funder will ask for future support of your program. Future support explains how you will continue the program when or if the grant funding ends. Your future support explanation must be realistic and specific. You must document where your specific support will come from. This includes your resources and also your fundraising. Make sure your overall plan for future support will demonstrate that your organization is forward thinking and is not only depending on the funder for the success of your program and your project. Now, this is a little caveat to that. While funders expect a detailed explanation of future support, they also understand that future support is always a work in progress. With that being said, they're not going to ask you to prove the future support, but they do want to know that you have some kind of plan in progress that will help continue your program and your project. Funders will ask the following questions as it pertains to your budget. Is your budget reasonable to support your program? Are the calculations for the line items shown? Are there justifications for all expenses? Are all line items supported by the proposal's narrative? Does the budget show matching resources? Does the total sum of the budget all add up? Now, the funders will not ask you these questions directly, but as they are reading your budget, they will ask themselves, and a lot of funders have a list with those questions, and they will say, yes, she answered that question. No, her budget does not answer that question. So make sure your budget can answer all of these questions correctly.